Ranking Member, I recognize Mr. Rosendale for 7 minutes.
Thank you much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to put you on the spot for a moment. I had a gentleman come to my office about 2 weeks ago. His name is David Williams, and he's an artist from Plains, Montana. And he, along with the Plains, Montana School District, created this beautiful, large 4 by 8 foot, okay, piece of art. It's a horse, and it is to recognize the Green Star families, the families that are suffering because they had one of their members that took their own life after being a veteran and being exposed. And I've got it up in my office. It's been signed by hundreds of people that were there at the Lincoln Memorial to support this effort that he brought out there on that day. And I don't know who has control over this decision, but I would like to work with you to see if we couldn't bring that piece of art in. It's utilized by local artisans to create the frame around it. It's truly beautiful. Please come to my office and look at it, because I think that the area right above that studio would be a grand place for it to be located, and that way every time that we have a hearing here, and I know this isn't our permanent room, but every time we have a hearing here, that all of the members could look up there at that piece of art and reflect upon the 22 or the 44 service members that are taking their lives every day, and make that a true priority. So if you would please consider that, I would sure appreciate it. And again, please come to the office and take a look. Mr. Rain, Operation Deep Dive is particularly important to me because Montana turned out to be one of the states studied. It brings me no joy to know that Montanans contributed to the 44 veterans per day that are taking their own lives. Montana is a unique state. Based on your familiarity with this project, can you give me insights as to what factors in Montana may have driven those numbers?
Yes, sir. In Montana, it's heavily rural, tribal areas. It's also access to health care. I think it's a tyranny of distance. You have to go so far to get health care. The other thing that we see is isolation, right? So in Montana, you're a rural state, and so it's tough to get between. I think the key is, and what we're advocating for, and I think what all my fellow panelists are advocating for, is let's go out and find and build a relationship with the veterans where they are, understand what they need, connect them to those services. But I think in Montana, you were the most rural state that we studied.
I appreciate that, and that being said, I've been working with several groups within the state to address this problem. We've got the Warriors and Quiet Waters project up in Bozeman. They do an incredible work, and also some folks down in Texas started the Overwatch project. And anyone who happens to be listening today, if they're having any thoughts or they think a friend of theirs may be, the overwatchproject.org. There's information online to immediately try to deliver some support for these individuals. It really bothers me deeply that anyone, but certainly those who fought to protect our nation, would sink into a spot where they don't recognize their own value, because we all recognize that they have value. How granular, Mr. Lorraine, is your data? Modern-day warfare, as Mr. Boss was just speaking about, puts very different kinds of strains on different troops. We've got special operators, we have drone pilots. Many of our troops have rotated through Iraq, Afghanistan, while others continue to be stationed in Kosovo. Do you have enough data to tell where troops served and in what theater?
Sir, we do. Related to if you served post 9/11, we have, the Department of Defense has been a great partner. We have data that identifies deployments and the location of deployments. It also identifies locations of assignment. So it's not just the deployments, but those who were stationed at Camp Lejeune, or those who were stationed at Anniston, or those who were stationed at other places that might be of interest on the non-suicide, but on the health side. Mm-hmm. On toxic exposure, et cetera. We have really pretty granular data. The other piece of data that we have is that we see the full career of someone who served. So we know that somebody who went into the reserves, served on active duty for a little while, and then went in the National Guard, we know that they had actually active duty time so that we can identify those we call as former service members, and we can account for them. We didn't account for, in the study, we didn't account for pure National Guard or pure reserve who didn't have a deployment that was a lengthy deployment.
So after you've reviewed the data, have you been able to identify the areas where you have holes that you want to go back in and fill in, or is that what the next step is going to be?
Yeah, that's the next step, but some of the holes are is National Guard or Reserve service a protective factor to if you get out of active duty and go into the National Guard Reserve, is that a protective factor? What's the impact of the characterization of discharge? What's the impact of moving multiple times? We would love to have the VA data and partner. I just want to say the VA was part of the IRB. A VA employee was a researcher, was part of our study. And that was important. That's the reason why we didn't classify people as veterans. We classified them as former service members.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. The last thing I'd like to say is I really, really appreciate everyone that's participating today, and each one of you, your comments in reference to opening your doors up to everyone. I think that you recognize that there's mental health problems across the entire population, and for each one of you to recognize that and open your doors up is commendable, and I really, truly appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Chair, we yield back.